Welcome back to the show. Our next guest is someone who needs quite the introduction. He is a man of enormous prestige and title and accolades. Probably nobody else like him alive today in our modern world. He is Prince Nicholas de Vere, and he is the designated head of the ancient dragon line, as pointed out in his best-selling books, The Dragon Legacy and The Dragon Seed. He traces his family heritage back well over 120 imperial and royal lines, deferring back over 5,000 years. As a child, Nicholas was raised in the countryside of Hertfordshire and moved with his family at the age of 7 to a remote village in Kent, as well as other residences in Sussex and Devon. From his parents, he learned a real appreciation for the natural world, his royal heritage, and an academic exposure to esoteric works such as those of Aleister Crowley. At the age of 13, he was initiated into his family's hereditary order of royal witchcraft at the hereditary dragon tradition. He was later bestowed with the rank of Magister Templi by the Black Country Covenant of the Baphometic Order of the Cubic Stone. This particular order traces its origins back to the Knights Templars. Then, in 1991, Nicholas was invested and gartered as an anointed knight of the Plantagenet clan Donachade by Lord Lear of Orkney. Nicholas is currently the sovereign of the Imperial and Royal Dragon Court, Ordo Draconis, co-founder and president of the International Council of Princes, president of the International Dragon Corporation, and these bodies are members of both the United Nations CSO and DESA organizations, and the European Commission's Register of Representatives, the latter in a consultative capacity. Nicholas is the Prince Marshal and historiographer of the House of Dracula Basarab and a royal member of the House of Bathory. Furthermore, he holds several exalted titles with the Pashtun peoples of Pakistan and Afghanistan. He also holds the title of Prince Chevalier of the Grand Cross of the Royal Order of Melazine, Baron Nicholas de Sade, Baron Nicholas von Saxenstein, amongst numerous others. Nicholas de Vere is considered by many to be one of the most influential authors of our time, and has regularly been consulted by professors at Yale, Harvard, and Oxford for his expertise on human history. His two books, The Dragon Legacy and The Dragon Seed, have become cultural phenomenons, and a third book is in pre-publication. In his work, he sums up from the very beginnings of earliest history to the present day the history of the Merovingian family lines that were disinherited with the Carolingian line via the so-called Constantine donation when the Merovingians and dragon dynasties were supplanted by those who were more agreeable to the will of the Christian Church. Your Royal Highness, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. How are you? Good evening back. It is much later there in Wales where you are. It's mid-afternoon here. What is this book you have in pre-publication? What is your work right now?
Well, it's going to be a legal treatise, which I am writing with a representative of the United Nations. He himself is our legal counsel and is an, if you like, an international circuit court judge, and we'll be endeavouring to explain the concept of sovereignty as it is in actuality and the ramifications of its correct meaning and etymology in the modern day. We will be taking a look at some of the work of the courts of cassation in Italy and leaning heavily on the fine academic works that have preceded us. Essentially, I think what we are trying to do is to make it clear in people's minds that the dragon courts and the various branches therein, the various associations therein, which are part of the Sovereign Grand Duchy of Drakenberg, which is actually the body registered with the United Nations as an NGO, will fully legal sovereign entity, and we will be including the humanitarian and charitable manifestos, political, governmental ideologies, our aims with regard to culture and society and so on.
That's absolutely astounding. Sounds like you have your work cut out for you.
Well, it was a bit tricky to begin with because the United Nations rep and I got together last year, and we were scratching our heads over the subject. But really, it's all very much plain sailing. The international sovereign law, as it stands, gives my house, the House of Vere, all the full powers of sovereignty, the right to hold a government in exile. I would call it a jolly exile, because really, unless you've got the patience, creating infrastructures again like the ones that exist is a bit of a nightmare. However, to have this as a diplomatic entity that is acting internationally for the benefits of the citizens of other less wealthy countries, I think, is a good thing. And it would, in a sense, be similar to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, but with no affiliations to any form of established religion. We have our own spiritual process.
Well, right. It almost sounds to me like, just briefly to touch on history, the formation of the United States under the Virginia Company.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, we're registered with the British government as the Sovereign Grand Duchy of Drakenberg, and in a similar sense as the Virginia Company was. We are in conversation at the moment with the Department of Honours and Protocol with Welsh government, and everything seems to be going ahead tickety-boo. Everything's wonderful, and proceeding really rather quickly.
How demanding do you see your role geopolitically as all this comes to pass?
The role of the House of Vere has always been that of what is called in ancient Druidic and spiritual terms the Breath. Those are the custodians of history, tradition, and philosophy. But in addition, I think our role is to offer, if we can, wise guidance from a balanced overview rather than the subjective corporate view that many people have been subjected to today.
Right.
So basically, I think what we're going to end up doing is being guides, both spiritual, social, and political.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. What would the reaction of, say, for example, the British royal family be to the scope of your work? How do they tend to react to these type situations? We obviously, the world is familiar with how they reacted to the work of Princess Diana.
Yeah, well, Katie Middleton cut me off. I just have to point out that in order to be royal, you have to have royal blood, and she doesn't. Poor kid, she's a lovely girl, obviously. And I'm afraid the House of Windsor itself, with the marriage of Kate to Prince William, has, in a sense, heralded its cessation and demise. There is very little, if any, royal blood in the House of Windsor anymore.
Well, not only that, but the attitude alone, and just to clarify for those listening, the name Windsor itself is a farce. It's their last name, if you were to look at, I suppose, their driver's license, would actually read Saxe-Coburg. So...
Yeah, Saxe-Coburg, Gotha. They were the cousins of Kaiser Bill, and they had a kind of an internecine partyside squabble around about 1914 called the Great War, in which millions of people died.
And Germans were very unpopular in the United Kingdom.
Yeah, well, the point is, here, Jay, that Princess Mary of Teck, who was Queen Elizabeth's grandmother, was descended from what is called a morganatic marriage. And what that is that some crown prince or count or duke or something will take a woman, bed her, and in the morning, Miss Morgan, she is then dismissed. And any of her offspring are considered incapable of inheriting. Now, the children that were born of one particular morganatic marriage with a Transylvanian girl, they descended down to Prince Mary of Teck. Ergo, Prince Mary of Teck, as the historians say in Britain, the Windsors were really scraping the barrel when they picked her up, because she just wasn't royal. And in ancient Flemish noble law, the law of noblesse uterine, unless your mother's noble, you ain't noble, and you can't inherit. So it all comes down to the female. So therefore, in all female lines, in the House of Windsor or Saxe-Coburg, Gotha, whatever you want to call it, there is no royal blood. No blood that is qualified to inherit or to rule. Why do you think young Bill got himself knocked up with a miner's daughter?
Well, I just find it a little bit strange myself that a young, virile male gets married and within a matter of a couple weeks is on a helicopter off to, where was it, Argentina, and not with his wife. That makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Well, the point I'm just trying to make is, what do the Windsors think of my work? I really don't care, because the Windsors aren't a royal family. They're just incredibly rich. They pull all the strings in the background. I mean, they're political monarchs, but they are not royals. There is a difference between a monarchy and a royal family. I mean, Stalin was a monarch. George Bush, may we be forgiven, was a monarch. Anyone who is at the head of any organisation, political or otherwise, is a monarch.
Correct.
Monarch leader. So yes, they're monarchs, but they ain't royal. And with wee Casey there, that spells the end of the House of Windsor, I'm afraid, as having any kind of claim to royal blood at all.
Well, those are certainly powerful statements, and I've had correspondence with you in the past, and I've seen the material, and I know it to be true, so I don't challenge anything you're saying, though it might be difficult for some to stomach, I think.
Well, the point is, I'm the Windsors. I mean, I'm not bothered whether they're there or not. They don't come round and make me tea. They don't wash up after me. They don't tuck me into bed. They don't actually do anything for me or for any of the rest of the population.
Well, right, and would you...
Whether they're there or not is of no consequence to me at all. I'm quite happy for them to stay there in Buck House. It's a lovely enough building. So let them be, No, they can be kings and queens of England if they want.
Well, in a sense, I mean, you're correct, because they've almost taken the whole philosophy behind what royal is and turned it into a sort of theatrical pageantry.
Yeah. You can always tell somebody who isn't who they say they are by how insular and defensive they are. And if you want a definition of anally retentive, just say Windsor. I mean, they are possibly one of the most uptight families on the planet. They don't like anyone near them, because anybody, like a lot of aristocrats in Britain who were made up from farm workers in the 17th century, or wool merchants like the Spencers. That's an interesting thing. You see, Charles's wife, ultimately, although like the Habsburgs she married in, her original antecedents came from a very small sheep farming smallholder somewhere in Warwick, I think, somewhere like that. But she certainly wasn't royal blood.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because we already mentioned Diana, and yes, she was a Spencer and from the house of Spencer and so forth. But you know, it's pretty clear that she was Merovingian, which of course is the scope of your work, the subject matter of your books, and so on. And without getting into all the finger pointing and conspiracy theory and all that, we can go ahead and safely assume that her death was suspicious. In your opinion, was she murdered?
It would have been convenient, wouldn't it? But
In more ways than one.
oh yeah, but no, I don't hold any opinion about that at all. It was a tragedy for her. A tragedy for the Alfayed family, and a tragedy for her sons. I am not even tempted to criticise or make any comment about that at all. She looked like she was a nice enough kid, not particularly bright. When she was a teenager, didn't do well at school, but she didn't deserve to be slung into the lion's den the way she was. She wasn't suited for it, which is obvious. And I think she came out of it pretty badly, and it wasn't her fault.
Well, and back to that whole concept of what is royal, what is not. The way she would carry herself and the work she would do, to me, that is royal. That the touching of people, the closeness, the care, the empathy, all of it. That's really how a royal should truly carry themselves, I think.
I mean, Auntie Brenda's cousin, King Juan Carlos of Spain, he owns a Harley Davidson. Everybody in the audience go yay and fist the air. And he rides that round, and he's been known to pick up hitchhikers and so on. They have coffee in the cafes in Barcelona and Madrid. They don't have security. And if there's any problems, his wife, Queen Sophia, has been known to go off and cuddle mine workers' wives at the site of disasters. Can you see Auntie Brenda doing that? No. No.
Quite right you are.
You'll be lucky if you get a consolation card off her. So, no, I mean, the Windsors just aren't royal. They are what the Germans would call Mensch mit kein Kultur. They are just commoners with no culture. And little Diana, I think, was nice enough. And if she had been treated like a royal by royalty, then I think maybe the domestic arrangement they had would have lasted a lot longer than it did.
Well, yes, she said in her own interviews, you know, she had the children, and then basically she was set aside, and Charles said, "That's it, I'm done."
That's right, yeah. He's done his duty. He's impregnated his brood mare. Now he's going off with some wrinkly old granny. You know. Great. I mean, that's not exactly the way to treat a woman, is it?
No.
Not Grail. That is not the Grail way to treat a female, you know. And it's certainly not the Merovingian way of treating a female. So, you know, I think maybe some kind of ancient alarm bells were going off in that girl's head a couple of years into that situation, poor thing.
Well, as they say, only the good die young, so...
Yeah. Anyway, so I think, you know, my attitude towards the Windsors is who, and probably their attitude towards me is who. So I can't answer the question about what they think of my work.
Well, to switch gears for a minute, you know, as Magister of the Knights Templar, I'm sure you're quite aware of some of the work I've been doing and others as well, and the geopolitical situation in Freemasonry. What is your feeling right now toward all the upheavals and power struggles that are going on in the ranks of Freemasonry?
I think I would echo your feelings on that, and that it has absolutely nothing to do with Freemasonry at all. To do with the gravy train and greasy pole. A lot of empty, vacuous idiots, all trying to climb the ladder of success. They join the Freemasons thinking that it's going to be a meal ticket.
Yes, yes.
And if they actually do get anywhere, which is rare, as you know, they end up fighting like little girls at the top of the pile. I mean, that is not what Freemasonry is about. Freemasonry, originates with, to a certain degree, not only with Hiram Abiff, but also as the builder of the temple, as the first tecton of Solomon. But it also descends down to Joseph, the so-called carpenter, father of Jesus. He was made a carpenter and Jesus was made a carpenter, simply to appeal to the great unwashed in the Roman Empire. And they did the same with Robin Hood, you know. The fact is that Joseph wasn't a carpenter, he was a tecton. He was a builder of the temple in the spirit. In other words, he was a teacher. And if you look at your Bible, you'll find that Jesus is also called that rabbi, teacher. And his wife, Mary Magdalene, is called Miriam the Mara, which is the Lady Mary Magdalene, the teacher. So the whole thing about Freemasonry is surely the secrets of Freemasonry, or the philosophy of Freemasonry, is about some form of higher understanding of life that comes from learning and comes from teaching. It has nothing to do with fat old paedophiles climbing some imaginary ladder of power and success.
Well, it seems to me, you know, they got a hold of the Templar material, you know, back in the day when they did, which is a whole other subject in and of itself. But you know, it's been perverted almost into a product that they know sits on a shelf and sells well.
That's right, and the same here with the United Grand Lodge of England. It's a farce, and I've been to Templar services and meetings, and I've met up with Masons, and quite frankly, I'm not impressed. Most Master Masons I've ever come across have shrugged their shoulders and said, like you have, I mean, that the board gets more expensive, then the helpings get even smaller, and the whole bloody meal goes cold while some twit is standing at the end of the table saying, "Greetings from this lodge or that lodge of the square of the 53rd degree of Torremolinos," or whatever. The Hotel Desperado, or lodge of Erdahubu, somewhere outside Peking. I mean, and then we give thanks and salutations to the members of and the brothers of this lodge, and oh, shut up, we'll eat the dinner. You know, and it's just like that. And the Masonic secrets, what are they? I mean,
Right, Rotary Club, yes. Yeah, I could talk for hours with you about this. It's fascinating stuff, and you, of course, are one of the world's experts on the matter with all of your rankings and everything in these esoteric orders. We're unfortunately going to have to take a break right now, but it's fascinating stuff. I would love to talk more about the Magdalene and that subject matter when we return. So please stick around, and we will return shortly.
okay.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness.